Everybody, hello and welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio, where I am your host, Jess Dewell. And here on the show, we are talking to business leaders, to aspiring business leaders, and everybody who's out there that wants to take a look at the skills they have to be able to, and I'm hearing myself in the background, so just give me 1 second to mute myself, and we'll come right back to the show up here. It's one of those cool things about technology. You never know, but I can't hear myself talk to myself. So I'm going to pick back up where I left off. And we're in the last part of 2017. And I have to admit, this can be the hardest part of the year for so many people, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's everywhere in between, and all of the things that we do in our life. We're stretched farther. We have so much more just to do that we pack in because of all of the festivities that happen, regardless of where we are and the traditions that we follow. There's more. And then, of course, there's New Year's Eve. And then that takes us into New Year's Day, which takes us into this whole other mindset. And I have to tell you, that mindset is going to affect our success. And here to discuss that with me, the words that we use, the way that we do what we do, it's all about our self-talk. It's all about our success and how one influences the other. Mary Fran Bontempo is joining me today. She is the founder of blog Not Ready for Granny Panties. She's also the author of The Woman's Book of Dirty Words and a book for, like the blog title, Not Ready for Granny Panties. Mary Fran, she also regularly contributes to the Huffington Post and Thrive Global. She also writes columns for Women's Voices magazine and Best Kept Self. You will get to meet Mary Fran right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
All right, Mary Fran, welcome to our show, the last week of November.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I feel like I was just on the beach yesterday for some reason. I clearly was not, but it feels like that. And now we're at the end of November already. It's amazing.
It really is. And we're having a really warm end of November. I mean, we're in shorts by the end of the day still, which is unusual in Boulder, Colorado, more than one day at a time this time of year. And I think out on the East, it's similar. Yeah.
Well, we're having actually a warmer stretch, which is really lovely because the winters here are just miserable. We don't have any of the lovely mountain, the crisp, cool air. We just kind of have damp, dirty snow. So I'm right outside of Philadelphia. I'm right outside of Philly. So Philly winters are ugly. They're just plain ugly.
That's interesting because I always associate places that I don't live as having this awesome, neat characteristic that is attractive.
Well, the pictures are, but they don't show you the normal everyday, the streets that are 3 feet wide that you're trying to navigate your cars down with the ruts of snow. Now, fortunately, I'm outside of Philly, so it's not quite that bad. I have a driveway, so I can't park on the city streets anymore. I don't know how. I can only pull into driveways. That's it. If I have to park on a street, I'm done.
I think we need to start right here. This perception of, well, here's my impression of what it's like, and you're telling me what it's actually like, and there's a difference here. So already I have self-talk and self-expectations that I have pushed out to you before you tell me the truth. And when I hear the truth, I'm like, really? Really? How could I be that wrong?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And you just hit on a word that's really, really important in our self-talk, and it's expectations. We tend to be married to our expectations, the consequence of which is we allow ourselves to miss a lot of things. One of the commandments in my first book, the Not Ready for Granny Panties book, is thou shalt lose control. And the concept behind that is don't be married to outcomes. Start your plan, work your plan, but then be ready for whatever comes along, because how often do our plans really work out exactly to the letter? They don't, but there's opportunity within that. And I found through my life experiences, and we talked a little bit about the show before the show, that where I was led was certainly not where I expected to go, but out of that came really wonderful opportunities that fortunately I was open to, because everything else that I expected to happen was kind of taken away.
That's so interesting. And I think if we all stopped and we looked and we peeled that away, we would all see we succumb to the chaos. And I use the word chaos a lot. And I love that you're using the word expectation and losing control, because the more rigid we are, the harder that chaos is going to show up and invite us down a different path.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. And if we're not willing to be open to what might possibly come next, we can often find ourselves at a dead end, because those paths that we're kind of being led to, and I mean, forgive me for getting kind of cosmic here, but I believe in that. Those paths that we are often led to are the places we're supposed to go when our expectations don't play out the way we thought.
And so that leads us into, there's got to be another thing around not expectations, but that supports expectations, losing control. What else? What other challenges are really common, no matter our walk of life, our socioeconomic status, the things that have happened or are happening to us right now? What gets in our way?
Well, we all have that self-talk, that negative voice, the one that says, I'm not good enough, I don't know enough, blah, blah, blah. That's right out there. And that's one that we are kind of all aware of. But the thing that I like to bring to people's forefront of their consciousness is this self-talk that's these kind of knee-jerk reactions to words and to situations and to things that we do because of who we've been. We're all at a certain point in life, and we've been a certain way for decades. So we react on the basis of that.
Oh.
Where to go from there?
Exactly. And I'm thinking, I liked the phrase that you used, who we've been, because in my experience working with executives and executive teams and team building, is that when we make a personal change, something happens to us, we choose something, we stick that stake in the ground, it doesn't matter. We have made a decision. Everybody else has that expectation of us and is pulling us back to who we've been, not who we are in this moment. Now, that's something I do with teams, but I don't work individually with people and work with their individual stories like you do. And so when you're thinking about that and you're working with that and you're seeing that also, how do you suggest that we recognize how do we recognize when somebody's interacting with us with who we've been, not who we are?
Well, one of the things, and to bring it back around to the whole dirty words idea, one of the dirty words for people is the word change. And we think of that as the boogeyman, because we all have a plan and nobody likes it when our plan is changed. That being said, as I said earlier, how often do your plans really work out to the letter? They rarely do. And when they don't, we change them. We change them so automatically that I tell people, look, you're already a change expert. You are already an expert at that. So when you've decided to move forward, other people are reacting to a change that they're not used to seeing in you yet. That's their problem. That's not your problem. You just have to continue moving forward towards who you want to be and continue along that path and not let that past behavior define you. And if somebody vocalizes that in some way, if you're aware of it, if you're kind of aware of what's going on, then you can address it directly. If somebody says, well, before when blah, blah, blah happened, you can address it directly and say, yeah, okay, that's how it was before. But in this plan, in this scenario, here's how I want to move forward. And just keep pushing that word out there, that forward word, because that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to change. We're trying to move forward. And that requires that we are aware in our own minds that we can get stuck in the past. We can get stuck in previous definitions of who we were. We have to be aware of that.
And that awareness then, the pushing forward, push forward. And that's got to be the hardest thing for people. I mean, it tests our courage. It tests our confidence. It tests our ability to know, really, yes, this is where I'm going, and to hold that. And it's really interesting. You were talking about change. And so if I were to go back there for a second, as you were talking, I'm like, you're right. We are change experts, and we were born that way. I look at my son, who is 6. When one friend can't play, he goes and knocks on somebody else's door. When nobody can play, he finds something to do. He very rarely actually says he's bored, because he always is like, oh, I've got something else. I've got something else. I can make this work for me. And somewhere along the line, we get to our role in our work. And then we get told, don't rock the boat. We get told, don't really think for yourself. Do what you're doing and just go with the flow, which is horrible in one sense, because how can a culture thrive and give back and do what the business actually needs to do in the best way when everybody's being put into this box and they're being told, this is the way it is, don't change it. And we right before we went on air, we were talking about authenticity and the rawness that comes with it, and the things that when we go through, we have to face. We have to move forward. And really, we don't have to. We will be invited to move forward, and we can stay exactly where we are until it's too painful. There's only one choice.
That's exactly right. I mean, and that is the choice. The choice is, do you stay there, and do you stay in that state of inertia?
Yeah. Which
eventually, this is the point of that whole thing. Eventually you have to move. And the choice becomes, do you move in a forward positive direction, or do you just move out of the momentary misery into the next bit of misery? That's your choice. And I think one of the problems that we have, though, is that we think too much about change and moving forward and that stuff. We put these ideas that is a thing that we have to master. And you said it already. We're already born that way. I mean, let's face it, if we weren't, we'd all be crawling. Exactly. Because we learned to walk. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that we get too hung up on, I should be doing this, I shouldn't be doing that. By the way, that's another commandment in my book, thou shalt stop shoulding thyself. Shoulding are words we should get out of our vocabularies. Mm-hmm. But we spend so much time thinking about the shoulds and shouldn'ts that we don't realize that we have already, without conscious thought, moved so far. And if we would just sit back and give ourselves credit for that, we would recognize that the things coming up are nothing. Like, you got this already. This is nothing. We just need to, a lot of it is, it's an interesting balance between contemplation and too much navel gazing. Like, you have to find that balance, and it's not the easiest thing to do. But when we do that, we find that we have already mastered so much. And that voice that's telling you that, there's this coming up. You've already done whatever that is in some form or another, probably 100 times already.
Isn't that cool? We've already practiced what we're facing.
Exactly. That's, if you take nothing else out of this, take that. We have already practiced it. We've already done it in some form or another. Don't be afraid. Just move forward.
You mentioned words that we would be better off taking out of our vocabulary.
Yes.
We got the should, the would, the could. What else would you add to that?
The would, could. I think words that we have to be careful of, and they're very, they have multiple uses. I mean, clearly the word no. And that's something that we've been hearing about a lot in the current dialogue and conversation about what's happening with the sexual aggression towards women and all that, the word no and all that. But we also have to use that word to advance ourselves, not only to protect ourselves, but it does come as a word to protect ourselves. But we also have to use that word when we're facing something that just doesn't feel right business wise too. I think we tend to, logic is obviously the forefront of business, but we tend to dismiss the fact that there's also an intuitive part that goes along with that. And because we're so concentrated on facts and figures and all that, we tend to dismiss that. I think you have to work the word no in there if it doesn't feel right. If it doesn't feel right, there are reasons for that are not only emotionally based, but are logically based. Everything that happens to us, we have an emotional reaction to. So if you're feeling that something's not right, there's a factual reason for that somewhere. Something happens that makes that thing, it's something you have to say no to.
I was at a conference at the beginning of October called Emerging Women. And one of the women that was speaking there was talking about dissonance, and that she just feels her way through everything. And everybody couldn't believe how she avoided the things she avoided because she felt. And so she started doing research. And the research that came up was that there are physics behind the feelings, and there are these energy flows like the sine wave in math that we all learned somewhere in middle school.
Absolutely.
And that when we are out of our sync, out of our rhythm, it's clear, even if we don't know what it is yet. It's like our warning system almost.
It is a warning system. And again, we have to recognize that is, it's intrinsic to us. You know how you said earlier, we're born that way. We are born with that internal mechanism that tells us when something's right or wrong. And the fact that we have conscious thought is our blessing and our curse, because we tend to dismiss the parts of us that feel as emotional or too touchy-feely, and then we dismiss their legitimacy in influencing our behavior. But they're as much a part of what we do as the logic, and we have to get comfortable with that again.
And let's talk about patterns in communication and style, because the family we grew up in, the place we live as an adult, with whom we might live and have around us at any point in time, after everybody leaves us or we decide to have whatever we do next, each of these phases of life that we are in come with patterns of communication. And I know there are very different patterns and approaches to how we show up in our business, how we show up in our life, and the choices that we make. I mean, when we think about military and everybody who has chosen that job to serve our country and protect our freedom, they have a very rigid set of rules because it comes down to life and death. And in business, we forget that it can come down to whether or not everybody in my company has a job tomorrow, which is pretty life or death. I mean, we're talking about basic safety here. And if we look in our own personal lives, if we're going back to the reactions, when we react, I'm curious to hear your opinion on this. When we react, is it a triggering of something that we're feeling unsafe? And how do we work with that to recognize and be able to move toward a response and know, okay, I'm triggered by that, but I am safe?
Well, that's a really interesting question, because, as you and I had talked about a little bit before the show, I had a personal situation with my son, who is in recovery from heroin addiction, and he's doing very, very well now. But for a very long time after he was clean, I would have these triggers, these almost cellular responses, because of the intensity of the experience that I had. I had almost these cellular responses that we were back in a bad place. And it wasn't until I consciously checked that and just thought, okay, we have to breathe. We have to take a step back. And it really is, you really do have to train yourself, because we have these almost imprinted reactions to things. When we have an event that's challenging to us, it imprints on us in some way. And anything that kind of triggers that can put us right back in that place, which can cloud our thinking both logically and emotionally. So it's really important to recognize that the minute you feel something, take a step back and go, okay, why am I feeling this? Ask yourself those simple, basic questions. What is it about this that's making me a little crazy right now? And then when you can separate the current experience from that cellular memory, then you can kind of move through it. But there has to be an awareness that all these things are tied together. And we try to compartmentalize, but our brains, as you said, to keep us safe, the minute something triggers that the brain thinks is not going to allow us to be safe, it's all back at the surface again. So that's where our conscious mind has to come in and go, okay, let's take a breath and a step back. What is it about this moment that's making me anxious? And then see how you can separate it from what that memory was that caused that reaction.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And thank you for sharing, how the triggers that you've had and how you were dealing with them. And I know for me, the triggers, when they come up, at first I notice it right when it's over. Shoot, here I am again. And then
yes. And
right?
I should have said this, that, or the other thing, you're in the middle of remember everything clever afterwards.
So awareness level 1.
Right.
Oh, I did it again. Right? Awareness
right back.
level 2 then. What would that be? That would be, oh, I'm in the middle of it and I can't stop it, but I can see I'm different from my emotions.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I think, we have to lighten up on ourselves too. We're not always going to be able to beat it. We're not.
Exactly.
We're not always going to be able to beat it. And that's okay too, as long as on some level we get what's happening. It's a process. Mm-hmm. Like it's not a switch. We don't get to just turn these things on and off. It's a process. So as long as you're aware and you're working through the process, that's pretty much all anybody can ask of themselves. And we do have to be gentler and kinder to ourselves in that regard.
I really love that you say that. We need to hear that more. And in fact, I really needed to hear that today. So thank you.
You're welcome. You are welcome.
And the third level of awareness would then be, oh, I see it coming. I am consciously making that choice to go down the rabbit hole that I know what the outcome is going to be, or I can make a different choice that I don't know what it's going to be because I'm consciously choosing it. It will be different.
Yes. And again, that takes time. It takes some time to get there, but you can get there. And again, it's a matter of awareness. It's a matter of acknowledging that your past experiences influence your present. You're not getting away from that. You are not escaping that. That's how we've kept safe all over the millennium of the years. People knew when they heard a roar behind them that there was a dinosaur coming or whatever, not a dinosaur, but whatever. So they ran. Yeah. So those experiences that we have are there for a reason. And it's a matter of talking yourself through it, recognizing why, and then, as you said, at some point being able to then make a different choice.
Oh, you say that so beautifully and succinctly. I hope everybody who is listening bookmarks this, comes back and listens again, because in the middle of what we were just talking about, you said it's going to take time. And that's and change, we can adapt quickly in terms of, oh, that didn't work out, so I can choose this, and we just do this thing and we just go through the flow. And that is a type of change. The thing is, when we're talking about what is patterned inside of us, you said cellular level. It's a memory somewhere, conscious or not. And that takes a lot more time.
It does take a lot more time. And again, I think we have to be gentle with ourselves, because most of the things that we have those gut reactions to are somehow or another traumatic. Mm-hmm. Traumatic things happen to us. And again, let's go back to the idea of keeping ourselves safe. Mm-hmm. That's why we have that reaction to them. And that's why it's so intense of a reaction. And it tends to cloud over everything else. But again, when we start to see the patterns, as you talked about earlier, the patterns of when that happens to us and what those behaviors are, and this applies across the board. This applies in your personal life. It applies in your work life. It applies everywhere. When you start to recognize and see those patterns and know, okay, this is coming up. I'm gonna hate this. I'm going to hate this, whatever this is, and I'm going to want to run away from it. When you can get to the point where you're consciously recognizing that, that's when you get to the point where you can make the different choice, as you said earlier. So I know I'm going to hate this. How can I minimize my distaste for it? Maybe in a work situation, how can I hand off part of this project to somebody else? How can I, reframe this or introduce something new to it that changes the dynamic somehow so that it's not such a drudge? There are ways to make those conscious choices. And as soon as we recognize that knee-jerk thing where we're like, oh, I'm not going to like this, that's the kind of place where our self-talk has to enter into play. We have to go, all right, I got a choice here. I can make a change.
Okay, I'm going to go back to cooking because we were also talking about that.
We were talking about cooking.
So in my world, I like to bake. I'm really not a cooker of things unless it's super easy, like, prime rib. And you were saying what? What were you saying about it?
I said I'm the queen of Jell-O and pudding desserts. If I can dump it in a bowl and pour milk in it, that's my idea of a dessert. So we had a total opposite experience there.
And they're both right, which is where I was going with this, is that just because it works for me, it's not going to work for you, and it's not going to work for somebody listening. What we are talking about, though, is once we own how we make dessert, for example, I mean, we'll just use that. We can say, are we creating desserts to create some sort of a mood or an experience? Are we creating desserts because it's just part of the menu? Are we doing it because we like it? I mean, those are three very different approaches, and we all get to the same thing. Our self-talk along the way starts with our perspective. And when we giving ourselves grace, like you were saying earlier, when we need grace around our perspective too.
We do. We need to recognize exactly what you said, that just because, oh my gosh, Jess really makes these fantastic cakes, I'm not such a loser because I can put together a really mean Jell-O dessert.
That's right.
So it's that total different awareness and appreciation for what not only we bring to the table, but others bring to the table. And, it's really funny when I say this a lot when I'm speaking to groups of people about what we bring to the table. I always tell people, if they don't know what they bring to the table, either themselves or have their best friend write an introduction for them. You know how, like you said earlier, you introduced me, and when I'm in front of a group of people, they introduce me and they say all these wonderful, lovely things. And I say to people all the time, every time I hear that, I think, wow, she's really cool. Like, I want to meet her. And then I realized two things. First of all, it's about me. And second of all, I wrote it because every one of us needs to own our awesomeness. Mm-hmm. And we need to not be shy about that. We bring a lot to the table, and it's not going to be the same as what the other person brings to the table. So when you recognize what your strengths are in that business situation or wherever, it's easier to then appreciate other people's strengths, and then you can work and make things happen.
You are listening to the Voice of Bold Business. This is program 105. That's amazing in and of itself. And more amazing is that we are at the end of 2017 and we're talking about self-talk, our self-talk and how it influences our success with our super special guest and amazingly easy to speak to, Mary Fran Bontempo. I mean, our conversation has a very solid thread here, Mary Fran, yet we are all over the place on this thread. And recognizing that life is that way is fun also. And it can be fun. It doesn't have to be scary. We don't have to worry too much about those emotional reactions as long as we're okay. We become okay with the fact that we're never going to be perfect. And in fact, in that same moment that we're never perfect, we are absolute perfection because nobody else is like us.
Oh, that's true. Words were never spoken. I mean, that's the beauty of it. Again, going back to the idea of recognizing just what makes you so special and amazing. I mean, every person who's listening to this, who is listening to this in some way or another, has come on a journey, an amazing, incredible journey, both personally, professionally, whatever. And you have the personal skills to get to that level, to get to where you are right now. Those skills are everything you need to take you further. And when you recognize, again, what you bring to the table and what your personal journey is, it's so much easier to be welcoming to other people and recognize how we can all enhance each other's journey and getting on that path and moving forward and just removing those self blocks from your head, bringing it back around to dessert. I'll bet your cakes are fantastic and my Jell-O pudding desserts are too. So let's put them on the same table and just enjoy it.
Yes. You're coming over for dinner.
I can't wait.
The next time you're in Boulder, you're coming to my house. Oh, that is wonderful. Okay, Mary Fran. So we've been talking a lot about self-talk and ways to get around it, words we should avoid. We were talking about the word no. And I love that you brought it up because it's very interesting that we have been taught as a culture, when we say no, we are weak, meaning, yes, I will do that for you. Yes, I will do that for you. Yes, I will do that for you. And now we have also blurred this line into this no means no. And there's an actual safety element of this as well. And it has been so diluted that we're in this place of figuring that out. So when we say, yes, 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 let me help you, let me help you, let me help you, what is that actually doing to us?
It's diluting us. Exactly. Exactly what you said. It's diluting us. You have certain strengths. You have certain abilities. You have a certain amount of time in a day, and you're not serving anyone well by saying yes to everything. When Sheryl Sandberg wrote the book Lean In, it's about leaning forward and taking control of your life and getting into things. And what I say is, before you get to that point, you have to lean out. You have to lean out of the things that are out of your control, are not your problem, and that you don't do well. So those are the things you need to say no to. It's out of your control, it's not your problem, and you really kind of stink at it. That's the stuff you need to say no to in order to have your own success, to enhance your own success story.
And when we are doing one of those three things, any goal we have set, we will never achieve when one of those three things is in our way. So we can hold those three items, and I'd like for you to say them one more time because I was writing them down, but I missed one of them. So I want to make sure we get that. The three things that we must hold as we are working toward any goal we set.
So you want to make sure you say no to things that are out of your control. You want to say no to things that are not your problem. And this is a big one, especially for women and children and all that. There comes a point where it's not your problem. You just have to say no to it. And finally, you have to say no to the things that you don't do well. We're just not all going to master everything. So acknowledge that and do the task or do the project well by allowing somebody else to work their brilliance. My husband says this to me all the time: work your brilliance. And the other things, let other people work their brilliance. And then we have a brilliant outcome when everybody works their own brilliance.
Something that you just said, I may have to frame and put up on my door here, is that we are contributing to a project by staying out of it.
Yes, exactly. Don't screw it up. If you don't know what you're doing, don't screw it up. Say no. That's okay.
Oh, I tell you what, okay, these nuggets of wisdom, they really are awesome. And
I'll be here all night, folks.
Yeah, exactly. We know where to find you, Mary.
You know where to find me.
Oh man. Okay. I'm just so excited. I don't even know where to go next. So let's talk about goals. Is there a process, right? We've got SMART goals and we got this kind of goal and we got that kind of goal, and we can follow a process to have some goal. Yet when we are not recognizing what's out of our control, that's not our problem, and that we don't do well, what happens if the whole goal is something we don't do well? How do we rally and find the people we need to make it a reality? Because we don't have to do it alone, do we?
No, and I don't think any of us can do it alone. I mean, there's a certain point at which everybody hits that wall. Everybody needs. So, I mean, I can't design a website. There's many, many things that I can't do. There are plenty of things I can, but, we have to recognize that if we're going to get to a goal at some point or another, you're going to need to enlist the help of other people who know what the heck they're doing, and not be afraid to do that. Now, I want to kind of spin this on its head a little bit, because one of the things that keeps us from getting to goals is, in my mind, another dirty word, and it is the word fine. I ask people if they're on Facebook all the time, and I say, when's the last time anybody said anything was fine on Facebook? It's never fine. It's amazing or fantastic or awesome. This need that we have to constantly make everything a superlative holds us back. When you're doing a dinner or whatever, it doesn't have to be, the turkey with all the trimmings or whatever. It could be pizza. If it gets the job done and it's fine, then let it go and move on to the things that are really important. Everything does not have to be awesome. So one of the things that keeps us from achieving goals is feeling like everything has to be amazing. Make the goal amazing. Make the thing that you're really going for amazing. And if sometimes that means you have to serve Cheerios at dinner, nobody ever died from a bowl of Cheerios. And I always say you can follow it with a wine chaser. I know that because I've done it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So accept fine and move on.
So is fine really a dirty word, or is it's an underused amazing word?
Well, we've turned it into a dirty word, and that's what I mean by that.
Yeah.
We have turned it into a word that oh my gosh, it can't be just fine. It has to be a superlative.
Right.
No, it doesn't have to be a superlative. And if you spend your life trying to make everything amazing, you're going to end up spending a lot of time on stupid details that don't matter. I was told to bring the paper products to a baby shower one time. And the theme of the shower, we have to have a theme. God forbid we don't have a theme to a party, but it was ladybugs. I could not find ladybug plates to save my life. And it literally kept me up at night. I was horrified that I was, dropping the ball here, but nobody cared but me, because people just put food on the plates and covered up the design anyway, and it didn't matter. So I went crazy wasting tons of time because I couldn't accept that other plates were fine and move on to something else that was more important. So we've made fine a dirty word. We have to embrace it again.
I like that a lot. And I think it goes back to the fact that we're all good at different things, and we can make a dessert and show up at the table. Mine is fine, yours is fine, and they're all going to taste good. And everybody's going to be together in community. And when we use these words that we've made dirty words, have become dirty words, get in our way, what I hear you saying is that it's very much, we're putting up this facade, we're putting on these masks, and we're distancing ourselves from that true community and that connection. And when I
think that's absolutely true. And by trying to pretend that you're all things to all people, first of all, let's be clear, nobody likes that person. Nobody likes that person who can do everything well. We just don't like them because nobody can really do everything well. And to go back to the whole idea of how this works in business too, this is again another part where you turn things over. You seek out those experts, as we were just talking about. You seek out the people that do things really well, and certain things don't have to be done really well. They just have to be done. So when they get done, they're fine, and you move on. And that's how you move forward in your work too. Everything doesn't have to be spectacular. It has to be done. Get it done. Get her done.
I'm laughing because I could let that go. Yep, I could let that go. Yep, I could let that go. And here's the scoop. There are going to be some things I can't let go. But I think of this list that you are generating in my head, I know 2 or 3 could go away.
Exactly. And then that gives you time to address the thing that you can't let go. We all have those things. We all have those things that for whatever reason have to be done a certain way. Whether it's our own crazy that's making that happen, or whether it's, the constraints or the confines of whatever we're doing, they have to be done a certain way. But there's plenty of stuff that doesn't have to be done a certain way. So just get it done and move on.
So we're going to move on right now because we have talked about this and you get it. Everybody listening here, you get it. And we're going to talk about responsibility, because one of the things that you said, when we're diluting ourselves, we're not saying no to things that are not our problem. How do we know when it's our responsibility and when it's our problem and when it's not?
I think what that comes down to very simply is, can you personally take an action that will change the course of whatever's happening? Very often we immerse ourselves in things that we really don't have control over. We really can't fix. We want to weigh in on it because we have an opinion, but we can't really, by our personal actions, change the course of what it is. That to me is when it really determines whether or not it's your responsibility. Now, there's a difference. We all see a situation where we want to help. That's kind of a different thing. That's a voluntary, yes, I want to step in and make a difference here, and that's okay. But when you're taking things on yourself and you're thinking about them at night and they're weighing on you and you're trying to come up with solutions and you're not the one who's going to implement the solution, it's not your problem. It's not your responsibility. And you have to step away from it, even if you know exactly what should happen. And, as a parent with adult children, if they would only listen to me, they would know everything they're supposed to do.
Okay, that never goes away. Got it.
It doesn't. No. Sorry, I hate to break it to you all, any women and parents out there listening. No, it does not. But I have come to recognize that while if they seek out my advice, I can say, well, have you ever thought about this, that, or the other thing? At the end of the day, it's not my problem, and they have to handle it. And that is a hard lesson to learn. But I'll tell you what, when you learn it, it's incredibly freeing. I mean, talk about a weight being taken off your shoulders to be able to say, sorry, that's not my problem.
Okay, I love this. And I'm going to go one step further, because when you said, when you're offering to help because you know you can make a difference, how do you know when you're helping? And how do you know when you're imposing?
That's a great question. That is a great question. The writer Anne Lamott did a TED Talk at one point, and one of the things she said was, help is control with a smiley face on it. So, if you're stepping in, but it's not really because you want to help, it's because you want to be the one to fix everything. And she said, stop getting your messy help all over everybody. So I think that that's the issue. Are you helping, or are you trying to control the situation? And again, it may come back to, is there one specific action that I can take to fix or help or change something? If your action in your mind is constantly spewing advice at people, that's not helpful. That's just you trying to say, well, here's how I think it should be. But if you can actually step in and, say there's a food drive and you want to go collect money for that, or you want to, bake cakes if you can make a difference by doing a specific action, to me, that's helping. If you're just spewing your ideas of how much smarter you are than I am because you have better ideas, that doesn't help me. No, keep that to yourself.
Right. Or help with strings attached. So, yes. Right. The same idea. And by the way, we all know somebody like this.
Oh gosh.
Again, somebody like
nobody likes that person. Nope. So don't be that person.
And by the way, so what does that mean? If you don't know anybody like that,
pardon me,
look in the mirror.
Yeah. Because if you can't think of anybody who's like that in your life, it's probably you.
Oh man, this is so neat. And I say neat because a lot of the things that we say are great because we hear it again. And the thing is, it's when we keep hearing it that at some point it sinks in differently. And that's what I am loving about this conversation for me, because everything you're saying, I'm like, yes, yes. And then we hit something and it goes and gets down to that next level. And I'm like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
Because part of learning, personal development is learning, just experiencing life, recognizing what's happening around us and our role in it. Are we witness? Are we instigator? Are we helper? But
that's, that is so very true. And I think that may go back, that may be another part to your other question. How do we know when we're helping? I mean, what is my role in this? If you can come up against any situation and ask that question, that's a great question. What is my role? Mm-hmm. Is your role to actively address the situation? Is your role to be a listener? Mm-hmm. Is your role to be the support person? You could be any different thing at any different time. And even in a similar situation, but with a different person, you could have another role. So I think that's really a great point to make. Ask yourself, what is my role in this situation? And then you will be able to approach it with some more clarity as to what your next step should be.
Which might very well be to say no.
No. Right. Sorry, not my problem.
Exactly. See, we're tying all this together, and I'm like, we've got to tie it back, because yes, it brings this point home. It brings this point home. So if I'm one of those people, and I am not an exercise, I am not obsessed with exercise, so I'm using this facetiously a little bit. And
I live, I'm right there with you.
I live to go to the gym, and I'm there, and I have these expectations. That's where we started. And I do these things because I think that's what I want. Yet, I forgot where I was going. Oh, so I'm chasing it. I'm chasing this ideal. It's easy to miss when we get there. I've gotten to my goal, but I'm so busy getting there, I've passed it, and I don't realize it. So and that could be for any obsession. For me, could be baking.
There you go.
But how do you appreciate when it's done? And when you get done, how do you not critique yourself that it's not as good as it could be, because good enough is actually exactly the most amazing thing that we imagined at the beginning.
It's fine, right? It's fine. Good enough can be fine. And I think one of the things that we have to do is really reassess that word goals, because we do tend to, it sounds like the pinnacle, the end all and the be all. I have this goal. Well, a goal can just be another word that we put on the next step of the journey. Like, I have a goal to do whatever, X, Y, Z, but don't be so blinded by the idea that this is the pinnacle that you miss everything that came your way along the path, because it is a journey. It is a process, and you never know where along that process you might see another path that'll take you in a different direction. I mean, when I started doing all this writing and the blog and all of that stuff, I was in the middle of this train wreck mess with my son. I was just in a mess. And quite honestly, my goal was just to sort of not go insane. That was pretty much it, not to lose my mind in the middle of all of this stuff. So, the goal doesn't even have to be necessarily something tangible. It can even be a state of mind. It can even be I want to try this so that I get to a better place in my mind. And that kind of goal can sometimes be almost better than a really, really specific one, because it allows us the opportunity to experience what's coming down the yellow brick road. Like, you just don't always know what's coming next. And you can't be afraid to link arms with the scarecrow and skip along and see where you go on the next part of the journey. So I think we have to be a little more flexible with the idea of what a goal is, and appreciate what we do to get there, in addition to the achieving of whatever it was.
I'm a recovering type A personality. I had to cross my arms at this point. Remember? Goes a little deeper. Oh,
so am I have to tell you. But again, when you go through some of these things in life, and again, the experience with my son was a great teacher to me. It really brought home, and this is another nugget here. Nothing is that important. Nothing is that important. If you fail to reach a certain goal, maybe you weren't supposed to reach it. Maybe there's something else along the path, or something beyond what that goal was, that's really where you're supposed to go. So I think goals need to be maybe benchmarks for us, but not the pinnacle. There's always another part of it. There's always another part that we can explore.
Yes. And so it's really interesting, because I've been learning to trust my intuition, my feeling, recognize that every experience that I've had for a reason, whether it was self-imposed or given to me. It gives me what I am and what the skills that I need today. You said this earlier in the program. And so I'm listening to this and I'm like, oh, yeah, we don't need to tackle that to-do list. That was actually one of the first things, was so freeing for me. I was like, oh, you know what? at the end of the day, I just had crumpled paper. What good is crumpled paper if I'm unhappy, my family's unhappy, my team is unhappy? What's going on? This to-do list is not helping me out.
Right. Just because you checked it off doesn't mean it's going to make you feel good.
Exactly. And what I found was the doing of the actions that I got to check off was exciting. So I'm like, oh, I can do this differently. What action do I get is really important today to move us forward, to move me forward, to open up a conversation, to go down the path that I would like to go down. And okay, I have to tell you, okay, so give us one more nugget from your Dirty Words book that you would say, you know what, based off of our conversation right now, this would bring it home. And when people come and they read your book, that they're going to be they're not necessarily going to be surprised, but they're going to be excited that they saw you here first.
One of the words that I think we have turned into a dirty word is the word adventure. Because we get stuck in these paths of action and these paths of activity. And when I say adventure, I don't mean trying to find where they move the peanut butter in the grocery store. Like that's pretty much sometimes all a lot of us get. But, we become so used to trying to get to a goal, trying to achieve, trying to whatever, that we're afraid to move off the path and see where it's going to take us. We script our lives, or we try to script our lives so definitively because we don't like surprises. We don't like change. And geez, I just feel like we're missing so much by not allowing ourselves to experience an adventure, or to be even more simple about it, to even see what we are experiencing as an adventure. That's maybe the simplest way to put it. One time I was invited to lunch in town and in Philly, and I just thought, all right, I'll go to lunch in town and whatever, we'll have lunch and I'll come home. And I was not looking forward to it, but it was at the top of this building, where at the very top of the building, I could see the Delaware River and the Schuylkill River. I could see them both. It blew my mind, because this is like fourth grade geography for any kid who grew up in Philadelphia. But to see them both from that perspective, and that was an adventure that I could have missed if I chose not to go to lunch, because I thought it was just going to be a stupid, boring lunch. And it wasn't the whole day, and it wasn't, I didn't jump out of a plane and land in the Amazon, and, it wasn't that dramatic, but it was an adventure. And we have to be aware of the adventures that face us every single day. And it can be the tiniest little thing. Like I was walking down the street with my granddaughter a couple of weeks ago, and she found a blue jay feather. Well, you would have thought, it was the Holy Grail, but looking through her eyes, it was an adventure. So we have to get kind of back in touch with that. And it really will feed you. It feeds you both personally and professionally if you are willing to be open to the next great adventure or the next small adventure, because they're both there every day.
Okay, you may have already alluded to this. I'm going to ask it anyway. So when we think about self-talk and we think about success, what makes it bold to want to actively change our self-talk?
I think it's an awareness. I think it's being willing to be authentic with yourself and being willing to say, this is a problem for me. I need to figure out how to deal with it. I have these knee-jerk reactions with things, and they're keeping me from achieving. They're keeping me from being who I want. It's very easy to ignore things that we kind of do automatically. And those are the things that we shouldn't ignore. So to me, it's a very bold step to say, I got to take a step back and look at what I'm doing here. I really need to do a little bit of introspective viewing and figure out why these things are triggering me, why they're leading me down a certain path. You can change the trajectory of everything you do by making a few small changes in the way you look at things and in the way that you speak to yourself about certain things. The word change is not the devil. It's gotten you to where you are, or you'd still be crawling around on the floor. So the word fine is not the devil. If you can just accept the fact that something's fine and move on, that's a good thing. So I think it's, believe it or not, it's bold to be a little bit of a navel gazer and be a little bit introspective and figure out what's setting you off and leading you in a certain way so that you can actively change it and make active choices.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am so glad you are here listening to Mary Fran Bontempo talk with me today. I mean, we've talked about adversity. We've talked about the reactions that we have because of that adversity. We have talked about the dirty words we need to avoid, processes about how to say no, recognizing questions that can help us understand what our role actually is. So we are choosing the best and highest use of our time with the time that we have. Okay, you're going to find all the program notes at Voice of Bold Business Radio /P105. That is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P105. You can also search for Our Self-Talk Influences Our Success. You've listened, you've heard. Stop by and rate the program. Reach out to Mary Fran Bontempo. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you learned. And we're going to keep this conversation going because as leaders of our own lives, as leaders in the roles that we have in our business, we choose to move forward or we choose to be pushed forward when the time comes. And let's get real. Let's get really real. We want to be alive while we're alive. And I think that is a great way to sum up this entire conversation. And I'm so glad to have had this with Mary Fran Bontempo today. Make sure you know, you've heard, you're going to watch. I'm saying all these things to do because I'm an action girl. So you know what to do next. Have a great one. We'll see you at the next Voice of Bold Business Radio. And until then, use self-talk to positively influence your success.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.